Good morning. I want to welcome everyone to the May 26th meeting of the Local Superintendent's Advisory Council. This meeting must comply with the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. Accordingly, the public may view the meeting via a link provided in the advertised agenda. To council members joining virtually, please ensure your camera is on, your microphone is working, and that you can be seen throughout the duration of the meeting. To all members, please silence or turn off other electronic devices that may cause disruption to your sound feed. As mandated by KRS 156007, the charge of the council is to advise the Chief State School Officer and the Kentucky Board of Education concerning the development of administrative regulations and education policy. The Chief State School Officer shall submit all proposed administrative regulations and educational policies for review by the council prior to seeking approval of the Kentucky Board of Education. Man, that's a mouthful. Before we call roll, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank two council members, Superintendents Russ Tilford and Will Hodges, for their service to the Local Superintendent's Advisory Council. Today's meeting marks their last one on the council as they are both retiring at the end of the school year. So join me for applause for these retiring superintendents. I think we have Will virtually, but we have Russ here. So Russ, do you want to say anything as last remarks?
Well, it's just been a pleasure to be a part of this group. To the friendships are always most important, but the opportunity to have a small say in some of the policy that it helps guide education across the state has certainly been rewarding. But most importantly, I will always remember the friendships and the relationships that have evolved through this opportunity to sit here. So it's been my pleasure.
Sure. Thank you for your service. Will, do you have anything to say virtually in Greensburg?
Let me say, first of all, thank you for the kind words, and it's been a pleasure to be a part of this group, and it is important work, as been noted. But as noted also, probably the best thing about this is just the relationships that we have built, and some people have gotten to know, and it's just been a pleasure. So thank you.
We want to thank you, two fine gentlemen, and we will miss you for sure, but we want to wish you best of luck in the next chapter in your. All right, at this time, we'll do a roll call vote.
Brian Alexander.
Present.
Kirk Biggerstaff.
Here.
Harry Burchett.
Here.
Tom Cochran. Will Hodges.
Here.
Dennis Messer.
Here.
Sheila Mitchell. Charla Six.
Here.
Russ Tilford.
Here.
David Trimble.
Here.
And Henry Webb.
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you. We now invite Commissioner Fletcher to provide an update on the Kentucky Department of Education.
Thank you so much, Chair Biggerstaff. And before I do, Superintendent Hodges and I got to know each other pretty well in the past few years, just a little bit prior to my becoming a commissioner. And again, really enjoyed the work with you. So again, I want to say thank you, Superintendent Hodges, for your dedication and your work. There's been a lot of things that you've done, not only as part of this, but also in advocacy across the state. So we really appreciate your hard work. And congratulations, friend, on your retirement. Again, it's an honor to have served with you in this capacity and just to be able to text you and say, how you doing, friend, from time to time. Superintendent Tilford and I, Russ and I started, we were in the same cohort together. We've been around, this is year 12 as a superintendent for Superintendent Tilford. Been friends. I can remember sharing a lot of good stories when we first got started. Again, Lyon County has been very blessed to have him as superintendent. And probably one of my favorite memories with Superintendent Tilford is the picture that he sent me of holding the state championship trophy and said, hey, you can come and touch this anytime if you'd like. So when it comes to basketball. But again, thank you to both gentlemen. I appreciate your service. Thank you for being a part of this. It means a lot to sit here and be able to have a good, open discussion with you about policies across our Commonwealth. So again, thank you both. Appreciate you both. Also, too, I want to congratulate everyone on the call here on a meeting. You know, some of us have had graduations. Some of us having graduations this week. It's always a really odd feeling. There's a lot of emotion when you tie up as a superintendent. And then a lot of people, unless you sit in the chair, you don't really understand what that feeling's like. You know, there's a sense of pride to shake hands with students that you've seen maybe have overcome trials, have overcome some tribulations, and students that have just really shined, and others like, praise the Lord, we got you to this point. So, but again, all the work that you've done, so thankful for the work, and I want to congratulate you, each one of you, and those others that may be watching too on getting to this point in the year. But also there's a little bit of for me, and I'm sure others, you're like, did we do enough? As a kid walks across, I always ask that question when I was walking down Bulldog Lane afterwards. Did we do enough? And I know each person on here always has that feeling. Did we do enough? And I can tell you in working with each of you, I know you have, and you keep on working, and I appreciate that. But congratulations on May, on getting some graduations under your belt, and also congratulations for the upcoming graduations too. Also congratulations to your staffs. A couple of updates. I won't belabor too much. We got a great agenda today. We're going to take some time to go over some things as far as accountability, also work-based learning, and also other things such as our our passenger van amendment. Hopefully we'll be putting that to rest. Also affectionately known as the Che Ritter policy. So just want to make sure everybody understands that. But also too, as we go through, we have the Senate Bill 197 does have us required to go back through the procurement process. I want everyone to understand that as we go through that. So far, that process, we went through that a couple years ago, followed all the steps, but the legislation requires us to do that once again. So far, we have worked with the Council on Post-Secondary Education to amend the RFP, and that RFP has been made public. It's been made public as of May 21st, I do believe. I talked with Dr. Stafford this morning. It was made public on the 21st, so if you'd like to see that RFP, you can have access to that. Also, too, moving forward, it had to go through the Finance and Administration Cabinet once again, and also the Commonwealth Office of Technology also had to review that before it went out to public. As it goes through, we've talked to them about how long this process will take. Again, it is overseen by the Finance Cabinet, and going through their process, it will be October at the earliest of when we'll know what the college admissions assessment will be. So again, just wanted to make sure everyone was aware. Again, following the process, make sure we do everything we need to. Also, I wanted to make this group aware as we're extending the scoring group. We're going to include a district assessment coordinator. Also going to include somebody from the Council on Post-Secondary Education to be a part of the scoring as we move forward. So again, this puts everyone a little bit at unease, if you will, because our students are going to start next year not knowing which of the two assessments are going to be used. Or maybe there's a third that we're not aware of that may be out there. But again, we do wish everyone the best of luck as they go through that process. But again, that at the earliest, October would be when that would be named. The last thing I will go through, a little bit of a celebration point. I want to congratulate each of the superintendents across the Commonwealth, and also congratulations to our staff. We got some great news from the Education Scorecard that was released recently. It was a combination and effort from groups from Harvard, Stanford, and Dartmouth that was looking at education recovery from 2022 to 2025. And if you're looking at academic growth in mathematics, the Kentucky ranked 8th out of 38 states where the research was completed in academic growth. And when it comes to reading, ranked 5th out of 35 states in academic growth from 2022 to 2025. So I want to say thank you to each of the superintendents across the Commonwealth, and especially to your staff for the hard work that they've done to get us to this point. That is definitely a celebration point. I do want to mention some districts that are also part of that. There were some districts that excelled in both reading and mathematics. So one is Anderson. So Superintendent Mitchell was, I hope that you're listening somewhere, and I want to congratulate you, but also Perry County, Marion County, Ohio County, Pike County, and Corbin Independent excelled, were specifically mentioned in both reading and mathematics. In math alone, Paducah Independent, Harlan County, Grayson County, Franklin County, Johnson County, and Boyd County. And then as far as reading, Clay County and Davies County. So congratulations to each as we go through. And congratulations to everyone across the state, because we couldn't have got to those two rankings without everyone working together for the benefit of students. So those are the updates I have for today. Chair Biggerstaff, I'll open up for any questions or anything that you'd like to ask.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Anybody have any questions? All right, thank you for the good work you're doing, Commissioner. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
At this time, we invite KDE Associate Commissioner Dr. Jennifer Stafford and KDE Division Director Sheriff Savage to guide us in a conversation related to future school accountability amendments. Welcome.
Good morning. again, I extend my congratulations to Superintendent Tilford and Hodges on their careers and the next step moving forward. There is life after the superintendency. I can attest to that from personal experience. So best of wishes to each of you. Before we get started, I wanted to update just a few other pieces around the legislation that impacts our college admissions exam. So, Glib to Sand, on April 15th, it was the final day of the legislative session. A new section, Section 15, was added to Senate Bill 197. And I want to point out to you just really quickly that the first four lines 4 through 8, what they did is they put limitations on the funds that could be used for a college admissions exam. And then the last section, 8 through 12, it called for a new procurement. So this was a surprise to us. It was not something that we were expecting to be in a bill. And so we quickly started informing people that the limitation of funds couldn't be implemented because it put the limitation on the funds that a college admissions exam had to be based on the Kentucky academic standards. And so a national product such as the ACT or the SAT are not based on Kentucky academic standards. They're based on what those vendors have developed over the years of their either college readiness standards or their blueprints. So with that, if you'll go to the next slide, then those first four, you'll notice the first four, lines 4 through the first part of 8, were then vetoed. The governor vetoed those with the limits on the use of general funds. He did not veto, though, the procurement and the requirement for a new procurement for a new contract. So you can see these are the lines that remain on Senate Bill 197 that does call for the department to initiate a new bid. So we have taken steps to do that. As Commissioner mentioned, that request for proposal was made public last week. So we were able to get through due to the diligent work of OFO and the work that they supported, as well as OLS. It's a collaborative effort to get this out publicly. So that was a expedited process and also the Finance Administration Cabinet said that it would be a priority of theirs as well. So all agencies are working diligently to get this out as quickly as possible. If you'll go to the next slide, that we do understand and how that puts us a bit behind in the uncertainty for districts to go into the 26-27 school year not knowing. So it provides uncertainty for our educators, our students, and our families as well. But again, we will work diligently to get it as soon as possible. The soonest that we've been told is in October. And so we hope to meet that, but that's the soonest. So everything would have to go perfectly to get it to that point. So right now we have a contract with the SAT with College Board that would have been a 9-year administration. And so that would have saved the Commonwealth annually for the first 4 years, $350,000, and then it would have gone up after that 4th year because of the fact that those latter years, College Board remained the same at their cost proposal, and ACTs went up. So it would have been a more increased cost savings of that. That contract will be nullified. Whichever vendor gets a new contract, because it'll be a new award. So the contract that we have currently will be exited, and a new contract will be in place regardless of the vendor. It will be, the process will be unbiased. We will go into the contract procurement in an unbiased way. We'll follow all of our Model Procurement Code 45A, and we'll follow that as we did the last time. I think that's the last slide. Any questions about that before we dive into House Bill 257?
So even though we had a contract with SAT for, I think you said 9 years,
That's correct.
because of the legislation, that voided that contract, correct?
It will eventually, yes. It will eventually. We've not taken that step yet because we don't have a new contract yet. But there's a clause in each of our contracts that says that we can terminate a contract within 30 days in all of our contracts with KDE. So we'll put that in place. Any other questions? Okay, then let's go hop into 257. These are about our assessment changes and accountability changes. We've been working with the Kentucky United We Learn initiative. We've been here in front of this council multiple times talking about various prototypes, multiple frameworks, and we're excited to have the changes that are been passed by legislation during this legislative session. So if you'll go to the next slide. So House Bill 257 did reimagine Kentucky's assessment and accountability system, and the fact that it passed and signed by the governor made multiple changes to both our assessment as well as our accountability. Next slide. Sharon, let me turn it over to you. Do you want to talk through the
locally developed.
the components?
Yes. So the first part of the bill, one part of the bill, it provides flexibility for districts to develop locally developed indicators of quality. And so if a district decides to adopt this measure, things that would need to be included is that it must be aligned with the Kentucky academic standards. It also must include vibrant learning, which is also defined in the bill, giving students a real-world application to apply their knowledge. It must be developed with families and communities and your work partners. So if you do implement this, you would need to disaggregate student data, and you would need to apply that online or in publicly display that district performance. Now, KDE, we will provide in other offices some technical assistance to help districts set this up and as you go along. And then to help offset some cost, we would give a payment of up to $15,000 to help get you started in this endeavor. So next slide, please. Now, before I get into these details, I want to make one point that these measures that I'm going to talk about at this point are not a part, they're not rolled into the accountability as of yet. So these are just measures that will be placed on the school report card. So the first one is around educators, the percentage of certified teachers who have their rank 1 or have earned their national board certification. And then it focuses in on 8th grade students, the percentage of students earning at least one high school credit by the end of grade 8. And then at the high school level, grade 12, percentage of students who have completed their FAFSA or have parents who have opted out. So next slide, please. So then what I want to make clear here today is that stability and confidence in your assessment and accountability. So we wanted to make sure that you understood that for this school year, 25-26, that the KSA and AKSA remains the same. And you've probably seen that because you've probably been in your testing or have completed testing. So for 25-26, we're still testing grades 3 through 8, 10, and 11 in the same content areas, including that climate and safety survey. For fall reporting in 2026, it is still the same as it has been. So status and change, those cut scores will, status and change will still give you those cut scores, your color ratings. Status and change will also be part of the federal classifications that gives you the TSI, CSI, and ATSI. So the main takeaway from this slide is that everything is remaining the same for the 25-26 school year. Next slide, please. So here is where we start to see some changes. Now, for the assessment piece, we are still testing in grades 3 through 8, 10, and 11. So that will not change. What is changing in this state testing program is the removal of editing mechanics, on-demand writing, and the removal of the climate and safety survey. So that is the big change for assessment, those removals of those pieces. Now, the changes for accountability for the 26-27 school year. We're going to see the introduction of chronic absenteeism as a new indicator. Growth will be a new indicator, and change will be removed. Writing, as I said earlier in the slide here, writing will be removed, so it's being removed as part of the state results indicator as well. Another important note for this slide, another key takeaway is we do have a contract. We're going to be going through the RFP process for the KSA and AKSA, so a bid is going to be put out for that contract as well. And it could affect the 28 and beyond administrations of the KSA and AKSA. So we will certainly, as we come back and speak with you, we'll bring you updates on that as we go along in that process. Next slide, please. Oh, yes, go ahead.
To add, one of the things we've talked about is having part of the RFP is have a preferential to try to get the test data back more quickly. So that's one of the things we'd like to add with the new vendor. Again, this is for the KSA and AKSA, and then we've got, one more year under the current contract, correct?
That's correct. We are going through an extension right now with Pearson for the 27 administration.
Okay, so and then what we'll look at is trying to get, because one of the things we keep hearing from legislators, we'd like to have test data, and not from our districts too.
Right.
We'd like to have the test data back as quickly as possible. So that's one of the things that we'll have as one of the evaluations of many evaluations that we'll have for the new contract.
Yes, thank you. So next slide, please. So as you know, the Kentucky's accountability system is made up of state and federal requirements. So what must be measured federally is graduation rate, English language proficiency, academic achievement in reading and mathematics. And the last one you'll probably hear us talk about a little bit more as we go through is the measures of school quality and success, student success, or you may hear us call it SQSS. So those are things that must be required, that are required to be measured federally. So next slide, please. So those changes that I was talking about earlier for the 26-27 school year. So this is a look at what the new accountability indicators will look like. So we will have state results in reading, mathematics, science, and social studies, individual growth in reading and mathematics, English learner progress, chronic absenteeism, post-secondary readiness, and graduation rate. So two of those indicators we're going to talk to you a little bit more about. As I turn it over to Jennifer, she's going to talk about individual student growth.
Sure. So if you'll go back one slide. So we're seeking your feedback today. So what we have is, this is a one step in a multi-step process that we are gathering feedback. We have, because of the changes in House Bill 257, we are going to change the regulations around both the assessment and accountability. So to bring those forward to the Kentucky Board of Education, we're seeking feedback from stakeholders to provide first input and guidance around what that reg should look like. Now, we've already had a few stakeholder groups come together And I'll note for you that Chair Biggerstaff and Superintendent Hodges have been a part of some of those discussions. We've had the accountability thought partners that they are involved in provide us some feedback and guidance. We brought together a variety of stakeholders, and we've met twice. We also have a group around EL progress. So we know that there are changes that are desired by the legislature, and we want to bring forward those. So we brought together a group of EL thought partners, and they've met twice. We met on Friday with them. We had a specially called School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Council group. Our governor appointed SCAC. They met last Thursday, and last Wednesday we had and invited in the directors of pupil personnel and had a fantastic discussion with them around chronic absenteeism. So we're gathering feedback in preparation then for the Kentucky Board of Education then to have a working session next week. And so we're gathering feedback, and we want to take your voices into that discussion in a working session, all in preparation for a regulation to be drafted and then heard for the first read in August. So we're going to ask you several things this morning around various topics: individual student growth, chronic absenteeism, and then we're going to get into a little bit of discussion about weights. And we're really wanting your feedback on those particular pieces this morning. Now, this will not be the only time that you get to have feedback on this, because all along the way, each time we go in front of the board, we'll have discussions with you on that regulation. So again, this is the first step in a multi-step process on gathering feedback. So where we want to start is here with the federal system. Now there's 5, and if you'll allow us, we call them buckets. There's 5 buckets that the federal government has. All states have to align their systems to for accountability. And that's they have the academic achievement, and they are very strict on academic achievement is reading and math only. Now, when Commissioner Pruitt was here, he argued that science should be as an academic, but he was not successful in that. So academic achievement is limited to reading and math. We can have a growth measure or an other academic indicator. So the system we have currently, we have an other academic indicator, and that is our science, social studies, and writing academic indicator. Will now include growth rather than the science, social studies, because we'll have individual student growth. The other 3 buckets will be the progress on EL proficiency, the graduation rate, and then our other measures will all lump into the measures for school quality student success. And if you'll go to the next slide, you'll see that Kentucky, we go beyond those 5 because we have 7. We have so part of the school quality student success will be post-secondary readiness. It'll be chronic absenteeism. And then we're going to ask you about your thoughts around having growth at high school, individual student growth at high school. So if we have an individual student growth measure at the high school level, then we would put the science and social studies state results into and lump it in with chronic absenteeism and post-secondary readiness into that school quality student success bucket. Okay, so if you'll go to the next slide. So as I mentioned here, a growth indicator is something that we're now moving toward, because within 257, individual student growth was included. And as we went through the Kentucky United We Learn initiative, that was the most supported indicator from the very beginning. Over 90%, I think I want to say 92% of respondents said that they wanted individual student growth. So we're very pleased that that did make it into the final legislation. So individual student growth is a measure of where the student is on their summative assessments to where they grew or performed at another point in time. So generally, we've talked about it being 3 through 8, and because the reading and math are assessed every year 3 through 8. However, we could include a measure of growth at high school from 8 to 10, because that's where the 10th grade takes the reading assessment. So this was brought up in one of our accountability thought partner groups, and our national experts who are helping facilitate the conversation around technical expertise mentioned that it was technically sound to do what's called a skip year growth measure. This afternoon, we're also going to talk with our Kentucky Technical Advisory Council. It's another national technical group of advisors about high school growth, and if that's and what they have for feedback and guidance around high school growth. So we're going to ask you your thoughts around that. But a couple more slides. Cliftus, the next slide, please. So why include growth in an accountability measure? Because it provides additional information on your students and your schools. If you look at individual student growth, it's more than where the student is in one snapshot of proficiency. It acknowledges that academic progress that students can make. Maybe perhaps they have not met proficiency, but they're at one of those levels that are at novice or apprentice before you get to proficiency, and can give credit to those students and their educators and their parents and their teachers that are getting them toward proficiency. So it gives them some progress and contributes that students are moving toward that goal of proficiency. Next slide, please. So with the growth model, there's not one particular growth model that works for all states. It's really around your values and what you want to get out of your growth model. Now, I'll note for you that our accountability thought partner groups are talking around two particular models at this point. One is a student growth percentile, and the other one is more around a value table. So the student growth percentile is would look at the students and where they are in relation to other students. So percentiles, 0 to 99. If a student gets in a 70 in your percentile, that means that the student grew more than 70% of the students in performing at that level. And this would be around reading and math. The student growth percentile takes into account what other students are and how they are performing. More normative type of approach. The value table is looking more at criteria and where the student is in relation to criteria. For example, proficiency, as I mentioned. So if a student grew from perhaps a novice, looking at those criteria then on those different benchmarks. So looking at perhaps a novice, an apprentice, and breaking those into maybe high and low, like low novice, high novice, and if they're growing toward those different criteria. So that's the difference. They're looking at either a normative student growth percentile or a criterion value table. So, and then each of those would be then assigned different points, if you will. So it's really around, the growth model is around more about your values and what you want out of the system than it is in technical in nature because it is around where you want your students and the values that you have. Superintendents Hodges and Biggerstaff, do you have anything to add around any of of these because you were involved. You were sick, Chair Biggerstaff, but in those conversations toward growth. I'll invite you to.
I really
to
don't have
share.
anything to add other than when you really start drilling down and looking at this, it gets very in the weeds and somewhat complicated. And each growth model has its own pros and cons.
Thank you. You couldn't be more right.
So are we discussing growth, or are we coming back to all this?
Let's see if Superintendent Hodges has anything.
Yes, a lot of good discussions, a lot of good work. I think that work, as you said, Jennifer, did narrow it down to these two. I did have to leave a little bit early on day two, so I was interested in maybe where that got to between these two, the work, the student growth percentile and the value table. I think those are two good choices. I have a preference, but I won't state that just because I don't want to distort or change anybody else's thoughts about it. But I was kind of interested where those discussions went to at the close of day two, as I had to leave early.
So the discussions were around the advantages and disadvantages, or the pros and cons to each of those measures. Not one was really bubbled to the top, because
Okay.
in any stakeholder group that you have people that are quite passionate in one direction and people that are passionate in a different direction. So there is again, there's no one right model. It's just the values that you get out of that. So I'd really like to hear your thoughts, if you would like to share.
Yeah, sure. So I've been doing this a long time, as you know. So I remember I'm not surprised that 90% of the people want to go back to growth because nobody likes change. But growth is very complicated and very convoluted, as you all know. I would encourage us to learn from past growth in the state of Kentucky. When we started off with student percentiles, and we changed that because and I know I'm getting in the weeds here a little bit, but when they do the scale scores, the distinguished kids are so compressed. The proficient kids and distinguished kids are so compressed. The range of the scale scores typically are in the novice and apprentice area. And what I mean by that is the point difference in those two areas is much larger. And I'll never forget this conversation with Ken Drought when he was here. We were going out 5 and 6 decimal places to determine student percentile on growth for distinguished kids. So basically, if you had a lot of distinguished kids, you were being penalized as a school. And I don't know if anybody wants to have that conversation today, but we can get into that. And then we moved as a state to the second option, the value table. If you went from novice low to novice medium or novice high, you got credit. If you was proficient and you stayed proficient, you got credit. If you was distinguished and stayed distinguished, you got credit. Because the discussion was, if you were distinguished in 6th grade in math and you were distinguished in 7th grade in math, then you, in essence, had a year of growth. Now, I know statistically they argue against that, but you're distinguished and now you're still distinguished, so you've obviously grown. That seemed to be a little more palpable. People could swallow that a little better because you're acknowledging growth in the novice to apprentice area from medium to low to medium, medium to high. And then when you got proficient or distinguished, because if I'm distinguished and I'm 97 and I drop to 96, I got nothing, but I'm still distinguished. And the argument was always, well, you get credit on the academic achievement side. But if I'm distinguished and I stayed distinguished, did I grow? Well, I would argue, unless the curriculum stayed flat, you probably grew. So in order for me to have any comments today on weight, I have to know how you're going to measure growth. So if it's growth, for example, if it's student percentile, I would tell you to make it as small as possible in weight. But if it's something different, so when we get to the weight portion, I can't comment until I know how you're going to do chronic absenteeism, because chronic absenteeism is going to be the very exact same way. You're going to have these same issues. So I guess my message is learn from the past, why we changed, what we changed, when we changed, That way we don't repeat the same mistakes. Because I promise you, all these passionate people is gonna get really passionate when they start getting penalized for having success. Thanks.
Thank you.
Dr. Webb and I were in a lot of those same conversations
Yes,
back
we
in the
was.
day. We were having a lot of those conversations, and very vividly, I remember talking about, if you had a student that was distinguished in third grade reading and then distinguished in fourth grade reading, they grew. They gained fourth grade content knowledge. So that was a major, and I agree with that argument. There was some argument there. So if you're looking at the table value, I think it's very important that we remember that as we move forward. I have my own opinions over on both, but again, as far as growth, I think if we go with the value table, making sure that students that are, if we go from distinguished to distinguished, there is a point value added to the district because they did grow, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, and I will add to that. I was a principal at an elementary school back when we used student growth percentiles, and we were a high-performing school, and many of our distinguished students were not getting any points for growth. So I can echo the sentiment that did not sit well with me as a principal of those kids who were distinguished. So I absolutely agree with.
Well, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I'll make one more comment about this. It's hard to articulate to a parent, because I've tried it, that your kid was distinguished in this year in third grade math. They were distinguished in fourth grade math, but your child didn't grow in our school. That is a difficult conversation, because the only way you can say that, we're basing it on a statistical analysis that is based on norming, and once again, I go back to our statement. If we're truly about stakeholders and kids and parents, we will review what we did in the past.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have one question. Charlotte 6, Anchorage Independent. What would be the advantage or disadvantage to K through 8 schools where our 8th graders then go to different high schools? And, I assume some of this data would be used for, instruction and that kind of thing. If our kids go to Jefferson, they may not be happy with the way we teach science here. I don't know, and how many K through 8 situations there are, but would there be advantages for kids going into high school, and then would there be disadvantages coming back to Anchorage or other K-8 schools because we no longer are teaching these kids? So just curious.
So either of the models need 2 points in time, regardless of where the student has tested. And so if they were in fourth grade in Anchorage and then transferred to fifth grade to Bullitt County or Jefferson County School, so long as they have 2 points, those assessments, then they would have the growth measure, and that would be then around the accountability rules where that student would be included in.
So it would be a similar model. So it's like transferring schools.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments around, because we have a few more direct questions for you.
Dr. Stafford, would you
Yes,
like for
please.
us to make comments about growth at high school level now, or is that
That's
coming?
that's the next, I think that's the next slide, the next one. Yep, there, yes, so that's perfect transition into high school growth. So as Superintendent Six mentioned, there is a variety of considerations. Having high school growth then would look at your wherever the student was at 8th grade, or that the test the student took in 8th grade. And then this would be reading and math, and then where the student then took the reading and math assessment at high school. And so this is a new concept for Kentucky. Other states have engaged in this type of measure. It is technically sound that you look at 2 points in time. So I'd be really interested in your thoughts around high school growth.
I'll just say the same thing I said earlier. To me, personally, I would have to see how growth ends up being measured before I could comment on this. Because if it is student percentile, then I would say leave it out of high school, make it as low as weight as possible. It's gonna save you a lot of headaches wrestling with schools and districts. But if that is not the measure, then I would be open to adding it to high schools.
Okay. So I'm hearing you say if it's a value table, add it to high school, and if it's student growth percentile, don't.
That would be my position.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, it's Charlotte Six again. I think that one thing that might be helpful is for all of our districts to think about, and we might need some KDE support to do this, but we all talk about 1 year's growth in 1 year's time, and we have to look at it in multiple ways. So that's what we focus on here. Instead of solely achievement, it's 1 year's growth in 1 year's time, but we look at it from fall to spring, fall to fall, or how a student has progressed with the standards across the year. So I think we probably need to think about how we support schools in looking at it multiple ways.
To
Thank
add to
you.
that, Superintendent Six, our measures will be, I agree with you as far as when I was in a district, we looked at our interim assessments and how did that look from one, as when we gave assessment of fall to the winter to the spring. But for accountability purposes, it will be the end of the year third grade versus the end of year fourth grade when it comes to growth. And this is reading and mathematics only. So if you're looking at that, how did they improve from the state test only and at the end of third grade versus the other? Because one of the things we tried to add as part of the accountability model was to have interim assessments be paid for. But still yet, even when we discussed that, we still had it comparing spring state assessment versus the next spring state assessment as we went through. Hope that helps.
Absolutely. And those are great points. I know for the accountability model, it's one factor that we need to look at. So I acknowledge what Henry said. I think that those are great points. But I think as a state, we have to talk about growth in lots of different ways. And so maybe then it doesn't seem as detrimental when we're only looking at it that one way for accountability. I don't know, just a thought.
Thank you.
So I'm coming at this from past conversations. We've had the exact same conversations in this
We
state
have.
several years ago. Theoretically, under the student percentile, every kid in Kentucky could grow. Theoretically, every kid could improve, and still some of them be declared as not meeting growth. Is that correct? Theoretically.
If it would be the difference between if the school got points for the amount of
That's
growth
what I
they
meant.
got. Yes.
But theoretically, every kid could
Yes.
have a higher percentile.
That's correct.
And some schools not get points.
Correct.
And vice versa, every kid could lower, and some schools still get points because of the student percentile.
Yes.
Okay, so we've had this conversation in Kentucky. The reason I would be open for it in high school is because if a kid's novice low, and I leave them at a novice low, I probably haven't done much. But if a kid's novice low and I move them to a novice medium or a novice high, that's some growth, whatever that weight is.
Yeah.
If kid's proficient, they stay at proficient 10th grade, I would argue they've had more than a year's growth. Same thing with distinguished. So that's where we moved to the last time in this state because it was none of it's perfect,
Right.
but all these conversations that we're sitting here having has been had before.
Right.
Just trying to save a lot of, I'm going to be.
Anybody else want to weigh in on high school growth?
I'm trying to hold back my comments as much as possible, but I can remember specifically our first go around with the growth when you looked at the percentiles, some students didn't grow at the same rate, and actually some kids decreased in percentile, and it looked like they were still growth for the school. It was really odd, and when you get into that percentile and comparisons, there's a lot of technical, and it's hard to explain. And as a math teacher, as a math major, it's very hard to explain too. Now, both models have some issues, absolutely, but I think it's very important as we move forward that I think it's important we're able to explain to our parents and we understand this is what the growth model looks like. So, that being said, I'm gonna go back to exactly. I'm agreeing with Dr. Webb. If we go with a table value, I would be very much in favor of going in the high school, going 8th grade to 10th grade, because again, to echo, if you have an 8th grade student who is proficient in mathematics in 8th grade and they're proficient in 10th grade, you could argue they made 2 years of growth. At least I'd say adapted to 2 more years of content is probably the best way to put that, and was able to perform. So again, a lot of the same conversations. I'm sitting here listening. I could close my eyes. We could review this back to what, 2018 probably? Is that what it was? It's been a minute. But again, I think it's important conversations. But now this is a new conversation for us, whether or not to include that in high school, because previously we did not. So just wanted to add that in there.
Well, it certainly gives another data point.
Yes.
For students, and without any extra lift for our teachers. And that's when I think about accountability, I always like to think about how much more does this add to the plate of our teachers? And so this really doesn't add anything, but it does provide us another point of comparison. So that could be a good thing. But I do echo y'all's comments that you made. The percentile, I can't really support that, even though my opinion matters little at this point.
The other thing too, I want to make a broad comment about growth in general. I think it's so important because, many of us have been a part of districts, but have been a part of schools, have seen schools that maybe their academic index is not very high, but maybe the growth that had occurred was a bigger celebration point than maybe keeping a high index. So to see a district that had taken students, a percentage of their students, and had them to grow, that's a huge celebration. And a lot of our schools would celebrate the fact that we grew. Are we a blue school? No, we're not a blue school because where our index is ranked currently. But we may be a blue growth school. And that says a lot about the work that's been done in our schools. So I think that's so important.
I think I agree with everything we've said, and we've kind of experienced that, and really I think the way I look at it, and I'm just a simple-minded guy. If we're closing gaps as we go through the younger ages with our kids and helping to close those gaps, there's less area for growth at the high school level in a lot of cases. So if we're not careful and we do percentiles, I think we're going to punish ourselves a little bit. Just agreeing with everything that's been said. But if we can figure out a way to do this the right way with growth meaning growth, we're obviously, we have a goal of growing kids every year until they graduate. And so if we're going to do that work, we should measure that work as long as we don't do it to ourselves and harm ourselves by the way the process we follow with percentiles and things like that.
Thank you very much. Any other, because we've got a couple other of feedback that we want and need from you today. But I don't want to cut it short. If anybody
Jennifer,
else,
I'll just add, Jennifer,
please.
as has been noted by several, I do like the thought of having growth at the high school if we utilize a value table. Given, as has been noted, that I guess the important part is, I'll say that if a student, let's say, is distinguished, as the commissioner said, and they remain distinguished, that they get credit for that growth. I think the details is important here because they do gain 2 years of content and they do remain a distinguished or proficient, you might say, and I think you do see growth. I think that's important to add and to keep in mind, because that does not happen everywhere. When you look at value tables, when you look across states or some places that doesn't happen, but I do think there is growth if they remain proficient or distinguished, and if we're looking at value tables and they do gain 1 or 2 years of content.
Great. Thank you very much.
And I'm sorry, I'll add one more thing. If we step back instead of looking at this by year process, I mean, that's how we're going to measure growth, is year by year. But let's step back and look at an individual student. If a student is proficient in 3rd grade, and then they're also proficient in 10th grade, they grew every single year. There is a considerable difference in where that student was in 3rd grade. Just because they have a proficient label doesn't mean they didn't grow. I mean, if they went proficient to proficient, and that's one of the things that we struggle with sometimes in talking with our parents is this is grade level content, that we're looking at. It's a criterion reference type test. So to say that a student is proficient in 3rd grade and proficient in 10th, and look at all that growth that's happened from all through it, we need to make sure that we have that type of credit for our schools. And again, I hate to look at it as credit, as a number for a kid, because we've enriched a kid's life. But when we start talking about numbers and how it looks in accountability, we want to make sure that schools get credit for that work, if you will.
Great.
So, once again, just to reiterate what you just said, it's very difficult. We work on culture. I saw some nice pictures in your hallway here on collaboration, working on culture. It's hard to tell teachers that you have 27% proficient or distinguished kids and 20% of proficient kids, but you get no growth because you've done a wonderful job making sure those kids were still proficient and distinguished. You taught them all new content this year, but you didn't do very well because they didn't grow. That is a culture killer. And once again, we've lived this, so please just look at the past.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move now to, I think, chronic absenteeism.
So as we've talked about here, one of the indicators will be the chronic absentee indicator. And in the ESSA, one of those requirements within the quality school, or the school quality and student success indicator category, so that falls under that bucket. It must include excused, unexcused absences when determining when we talk about this indicator. Now, more than 30 states do use this in their accountability system, and I don't have it broke down per state, but when we talk about weight in the accountability system, it does range from 5 to 10% on average that other states use. Now, for Kentucky, setting for the 24-25 school year in the school report card, we are setting at a 25% chronic absentee indicator. Next slide, please. So on the screen there, we have for you House Bill 257 is defined, but I'm just going to read it to you real quick because I have how House Bill 257 defines it, and then I want to read to you, and I hate to read to you, but I want you to hear the exact language. So, and I have the federal definition as well. So House Bill 257 defines chronic absenteeism indicator as a student engagement as measured by chronic absenteeism, which shall be defined as a student missing 10% or more of yearly school time for excused or unexcused reasons throughout the school year. The federal definition is chronic absenteeism is typically defined as missing at least 10% of school days or approximately 18 days in a year for any reason, excused or unexcused. ESSA states that it must be measured for at least a half a year. So in Kentucky, we define that a year to be 100 days. So this indicator could be measured at a 50-day enrollment to ensure accountability without having a track back. So what I mean by not having a track back, if we have a school that we have a student in Scott County for 50 days, in Carter County for 50 days, and then he or she moves to, say, Bath County, that doesn't track back to Scott or to Carter County. Each school would be accountable for that student. We wouldn't be tracking back and one Bath County being responsible for all three. We did meet with DBP, sorry. We did meet with them last week, and we discussed all of this, the definitions between the two, and how the chronic absenteeism is currently calculated in Kentucky. And they were in favor of the federal definition and using the 50-day with no track back. So we've talked a lot about the different aspects of chronic absenteeism, and so we want to seek your feedback on your thoughts on it and how it maybe should be weighted, because it's one of the indicators we'll have to have a weight for because it's not currently in the accountability system.
So just to reiterate what Shara just said, because it is beneficial to hear things a couple of times.
Yes.
So with ESSA, putting this into accountability system, it will go into the quality, the quality bucket, that last one. So we met with DPPs last week, and there are two definitions in the state of Kentucky. One is a state definition that has more around the minutes that the student is in the school. There's a federal one that looks more around the half days and whole days. Now, when we brought the DPPs in, they were in favor of using the federal definition around half and whole days. There is concern that we have students that are medically fragile or that have recurring medical appointments. That with the state definition, it would take into account all of those just quick checkouts for a doctor's appointment and then back in. Whereas the federal definition, it seemed, would not catch as much. And Jesse Carlton from OFO is here, and so if there's anything that needs to be clarified, Jesse is expert in these definitions. So the DPPs asked, they were in favor of using that federal definition. And so also in ESSA, where we defined a whole year as 100 days, and that's been in a lot of our indicators. Now, our graduation rate is not 100 days, and so we have, historically, we have indicators that have different types of inclusionary guidelines. So with ESSA, they look at you can look at a half a year. So if we take our definition, Kentucky's definition of a whole year, and look at half a year, that would be 50 days. So the U.S. Department of Education has approved other states to include chronic absenteeism in their accountability system with 50 days. Now, the benefit of 50 days, as Shara mentioned, we wouldn't have to have the track back. So like our 100 days now, and Superintendent 6, she mentioned, having other schools and being responsible for what other schools do. If we utilize the 50 days, we wouldn't have to have that, because every school then would be responsible for that student and that enrollment for those 50 days that they were there. So if they're in Carter County for 50 days, Carter County would get the 50 days that the student was in theirs. If they move to, I think you said Jefferson, no, you said Carter County. If they moved to Carter County and they were there 50 days, then they would get their enrollment at that school for that time. And then if they went to Bath County for then 100 days or 125, whatever they're there, then Bath County would get that student in theirs for the time frame. So the student would impact each of the different schools only the enrollment that they're there. Whereas if we did the 100 days for chronic absenteeism, then Bath County, that last county that got the 125 days, would get all of the track back. And when we felt like it would be more fair at doing the 50 days rather than the track back. And the DPPs were very supportive of that as well, because that alleviated a lot of their concerns as well. So that's a lot of information. Again, initial reactions, your feedback, and thoughts around chronic absenteeism.
The weight.
My first thought is I do trust the DPP Association and their voice in this. So I would lean heavily towards their guidance. They deal with absenteeism and attendance daily. I also recognize that we will have several students across the state. When we begin school, we know they will be chronic absentee students just because of their medical condition.
Right.
It could be something as simple as living in a rural community and having orthodontics. Those
Right.
monthly visits are gonna, you do that each month, and then you have a flu during the middle of the winter. You've maxed out your days
Yeah.
with all excused absences. So just recognize that we will always have students that fall into this category that are excused every single time that they're out of our buildings. Truthfully, as a former DPP, I wish we had looked more at habitual truancy as the root cause of this, the ones that are missing without excuse. But that's not what the hand that we've been dealt. So I just recognize that we will have students that, as chronic absenteeism as it's defined, we're going to have kids by no fault of their own will be in that category each and every year of their attendance.
That reminds me of a point that when we have standard setting, so move to the fall of 2027, we'll have standard setting, and we will have DPPs part of that standard setting. So when we look at chronic absenteeism, then they will be in the room setting the thresholds of then what is for that indicator of what's a blue, a green, and so forth on that. So it doesn't, we understand that there will be chronic absenteeism, but those thresholds will be set with them providing and other stakeholders providing that feedback.
So I would just simply make the recommendation until all that's figured out and we can see, to your point, we're going to have, and the message from our region on this particular topic was there's lots of reasons kids are chronically absent.
Right.
Some people have more support from the judicial system than others, so forth and so on. So until we figure all that out, my advice would be to start out at the lowest level, and it can always be adjusted to be more weight moving forward. I don't know a school in this state that's not trying to get kids in school because of the academic achievement and growth, because we want kids to be successful.
Right.
Start at the lowest level, weight, and then add should somebody choose to do that at a later date. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I would agree with them on that issue, because I think that when you really look at the definition, there are going to be many school districts who have high levels of chronic absenteeism, and I had the thought of the medically frail students and that kind of thing. So I think definitely start as low as possible.
Like I said, I agree about the DPP Association. I think their recommendation looking at half days is very important, because if a parent's going to take the effort to try to schedule a doctor's appointment at the end of the day where they're out half hour, or they're going to come in maybe an hour late, that's not a full half day. So I do like that definition. I appreciate that, because we want to make sure that, if there's an orthodontist appointment, many of us have had kids that have orthodontics. It's just something that happens monthly.
That's
and
right.
We go through
Yeah.
that. So again, I do like the idea. I agree with Superintendent Tilford. Habitual truancy would have been a better area, but this is the hand that we're dealt with chronic absenteeism. But anything that where we start out with the half days, I'm in favor of also too. And I guess I'm trying to speak as a former superintendent there.
Well, I think it's the one, there's very little in this that we can actually control, which is the unfortunate piece of this. A kid who goes to the doctor, we can say that we can question if they're overusing doctor's notes and all that, but none of us are doctors. And so that gets into a very difficult place for our DPPs and for us as superintendents. But we can say that if your doctor's appointment was 6 miles down the road, it was with a chiropractor at 9 a.m., we're not going to excuse you for an entire day. We can have a little bit of teeth in this on something like that if we measure half days. When we get into minutes, that gets a lot more difficult, and it really, to me, it feels like chronic absenteeism is a fight that's going to be a real difficult fight, especially when you have students that do have significant need and do have students who have, let's just be honest, significant reach as far as getting a doctor's note. I don't know any other way to say it, but it's honest, and so. But we can, and I think our DPPs work really hard. As a former DPP and working in that association, I think we have a lot of DPPs who are willing to walk into a doctor's office and say, "Hey, we need you to start putting the time that a kid was here," and then we can then start to measure. You don't get to go all day to the chiropractor down the street, but we will have kids in Pikeville who have to go to Louisville, and that's going to be all day, and we can't stop that.
Right.
Any other comments? Because I do want, you have other topics on your agenda today, and I don't want to take, but I want to give time. Okay, the last is around weighting, and you see here, so weights are based on your values. It's what you value. So you can look at a table and you can see where the Kentucky Board of Education has set the values on there. You can see where they value reading and math, where they value the chronic absent or the quality of climate and safety survey, graduation rate, and so forth. So it tells you a lot about the thinking of the individuals and stakeholder feedback on there. So this is our current weights. If you'll go to the next slide, then you can see that where the indicator weights and the indicators along the new system. And you do see the individual student growth, chronic absenteeism in there. Now, I'll note for you the bottom is important because ESSA requires your academic indicators of in those buckets we talked about, the academic indicators of reading and math, the growth, graduation rate at that high school, and then the in the English language proficiency. All of those combined must be substantially higher than all of the measures that go into that quality and student success bucket. And so when we look at the overall weights into the system, your state assessment results in reading and math, your individual student growth, your English learner, and then your graduation rate at high school has to combine to be more than your school quality student success indicator. So in Kentucky, that would be, again, post-secondary readiness, chronic absenteeism, and then whether or not at high school we go with growth, and then the quality of and climate, or the success would include that science and social studies. So I've heard a little bit today around the fact that we want chronic absenteeism to be low. We want, at high school, I've heard that there is support for individual student growth at high school from LSAC. And I've also heard that if we go with student growth percentiles to make growth smaller, and if we go with the value table to make growth higher in weight. So other comments, other feedback around what the weights could be. And I'm not looking for particular percentages here. You know, I don't, unless you want to say something should be 50% or that, but
I just want to clarify that I thought I heard that the support was there for growth at the high school if the table was used and not the student percentiles.
that's correct. Did I say it the other way?
You just didn't clarify.
Okay,
Okay.
yes.
Just want to clarify that. And the other thing I would say is, you're going to talk about EL?
Yes.
Yeah, we have a slide on that.
We have a
briefly.
slide on EL.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I'll just go ahead and say that there's only like 30 districts in Kentucky that's got enough kids to classify for EL anyway. Sitting here with 100 newcomers this year, if you've never experienced, come see us. And we're trying to get these kids to learn English, integrate them, and then we're testing them. I would encourage us to make that as low as possible, because it's only 30 districts, and move any of that we can't make any, that we take away from that and put in graduation. That'd be my recommendation. When we're only assessing 30% or 33, I think there's 33, 34 districts I don't have in front of me that only have enough to qualify. It's almost, with no funding, zero. It's just, it's a big issue. I'd encourage us to take a look at that.
Can we go back one slide, please, just to, that way I want everybody to be able to see this, you know, as you're thinking about it. You know, right now, English language learner, 5% across the board. Quality school quality of school climate and safety is 4%. You see post-secondary areas and graduation. So, you know, the big change here would be as far as how the growth impacts this as we go forward too, so.
And to my comments earlier, I can't, until we determine how we're gonna do growth, it's basically what you said. If it's a table model, I could support making it a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. That's what we need.
Dr. Stafford, and correct me if I'm wrong, do the assessments in reading and mathematics have to be higher than the others, if just looking at that individually? Seems
So
like I remember some
we
of
have to
those
look at the
discussions.
buckets. The buckets are important because you have to have your reading and math, your growth, your EL, and your graduation has to be substantially higher.
Okay, so those combined.
Those combined. Like when you look at high school, because right now we don't have a growth in this. So if you look at high school, it's not 50%, the reading and math, it's only at 45. But if you add to that, then your EL and your graduation rate, you get 56%. So that's substantially more than the others.
And I don't want to beat this, but I've been talking about EL. I've called KDE. I mean, the funding is what the funding is. It's a tough issue. It really is. But those EL kids are also counted in the other areas.
And
They're
we're-
being assessed, reading
That's
and math.
correct, yes.
So you're being, twice we're getting,
And
held
their science
accountable
and
for those
social studies,
students.
too, and their science and social studies.
yeah, so we're getting, with EL, you're getting assessed in all these areas, and then just on their English progress as well. So that's why I say, make it as, I don't know if you can do 1%, but we're being held accountable for those kids, as we should be.
Your English learner progress is the progress that your EL students are making on the English language proficiency
Absolutely.
exam, and the access, yes. Yeah, whereas in reading and math and those, and then individual student growth will be on that reading and math in the content test. Yeah, yes.
That will help, getting credit for moving those kids, if it's a table model.
Yeah. And then if, it's gonna lead right into Shara's last point, but I don't wanna move on unless everybody has weighed in on the weights that is ones too. Okay, so there are, although it's not part of House Bill 257, there is desire to move to different flexibility that ESSA allows. And now that we have individual student growth, we can move to a flexibility that is different than what we're currently doing now. So if you'll go to the next slide.
So as Jennifer said, House Bill 257 does not make changes to this indicator. But we are working, as you've heard us talk about, the thought partner group. So because ESSA makes flexibility for us, so we wanted to take a look at that, and we have a couple options to get your feedback on. So we're talking about students who have been in the United States less than 12 months. And for both of these options, students will take the mathematics, and they will take the ELP, the WIDA assessment every year. But the two options that we have on the table is option one, that those students are just simply exempt from ELA, the assessment in the first year. And then option two is they test in ELA in the first year, but the results are not reported in accountability. Year two, the results are reported, but they include the individual student growth. Then by year three, they're completely reported in accountability calculations. So those are the couple of options we have on the table, and Dr. Flesher has some comments.
Just a clarification on option one. We're saying that the students would not have to take the ELA test in the first year, but in the second year, their growth, in the second year, their accountability calculations are included, correct? We wouldn't have a growth for them, but their accountability calculations would be included in year two.
That's right. So option
Okay.
one is what we do now. And so they would take the assessments in the second year and then be included in accountability. So option two is of interest with particular legislators that were in support of House Bill 257. And so they're really looking at option two, where the student would take the assessments for a baseline in year one, and that would then set the ability for the student to be included in the growth measure in year two. So the student would then test in year two and be included in growth, and then in year three be included in both proficiency and individual student growth in year three. So it would be more of an onboarding for the student in that. The particular model, again, is being discussed through our EL Thought Partner Group. And again, the model is not finalized because we're still in the discussion phase of how to include that type of growth into our accountability system.
So option two just gives you more time with that student to get them, as Jennifer noted, onboarded in U.S. schools.
All right. Any thoughts before we finalize here?
Is there a specific number of days a kid has to be in school before that they're tested? That under option two, option two is obviously better than option one. But in my opinion, are there a number of days the kid has to be in school before he or she is tested? As a newcomer comes in March the 1st, they go ahead and take the test?
We have not set those business rules yet. So we haven't gotten to those specific details on the model, but what we currently do now is if they're there on the first day of testing, then they would take the assessment.
Well, as you know, once again, I'm not trying to get in the weeds here, but you're talking about two different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
If I've got a kid all year and they're first year and they test, if I get a kid a week before testing and they test, but I've only had a week to work with them, the growth could even look different the second year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you address that, but there needs to be some parameters around that. I'm just telling you all, the EL is a mess. It is a mess. It's not fair to kids. It's not fair to teachers. They should, in my opinion, there should be, I don't know if the federal government allows it, there should be a level of English proficiency before you're held accountable on a test that's given in English. I mean,
These are the exemptions that they give, these two things.
I know, but
Yeah,
I can gripe
yeah,
about it,
Yeah,
can't I?
you can, you can.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, but anyway, option 2 is better, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do recognize Henry's point. You take a student that's just moved in, the stress level for the child,
Yeah.
I hope would be considered at some point. If you've been there just for the whole year, certainly, maybe you are prepared. But if you've only been in this school, in this country for a matter of days, that is undue stress for a child.
I guess my question would be, like, looking at option 2 or either of the options, so when they come in, or I'm sorry, in option 2, would the federal exemption allow us to say, okay, the student has to be in a district for 50 days before we'd assess them? Does it allow that?
Our standard's 100 days. That's what I was thinking. If they
Right.
enroll in March, their first year wouldn't count till the next year. They can take the assessment. That would be their year 1 because of our 100-day rule. That's what I was referencing.
Okay. In these flexibilities are not in the regulation. It's through our ESSA state plan, our consolidated state plan. So we can certainly take that into the negotiation with USED. So noted with that. Okay. Well, I want to say thank you so much for your discussion today and all the good feedback that you've had. Just in closing, there's a timeline here that we've mentioned for regulations. We'll be back in front of you in July for the first read of the regulation. So we'll have the draft in front of you to talk through then. So enjoy your summer until we see you again.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Well, that was a big chunk of the meeting. Yes, great discussion. We welcome Associate Commissioner Dr. Beth Hargis and Tina Broglie of the Kentucky Department of Education's Office of Career and Technical Education to present on applications for work-based learning placements for state accountability. Hello.
Good morning. I am Beth Hargis, and Tina is online with us if you have any questions. This is the third year that we are bringing the work-based learning experiences to you for approval that are not associated with course code. And so these experiences provide an opportunity for post-secondary readiness for co-ops, internships, or apprenticeships, and they have to be aligned to a credential or an associate degree, and they can take place outside of the regular school day, week, or year. And so this year, we've had 20 applications, and I believe you have access to those, or at least to the spreadsheet that tells in your information, and we are recommending that 14 of those be approved. And so I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Is that typical of the amount that are usually?
It's varied. Again, this is just the third year that that we're bringing them. Let's see, we've got a 70% approval rate this year, and then during the 25 school year, we had 12 that were brought, and we recommended 5 of those, so a 42% pass rate. And then the first year, 24, we had a pass rate of 19%, and we had 42 applications that year, but we only brought 8 of those to you for approval. So I think that people are starting to figure out, districts and students as both are starting to figure out what it actually takes for an application to be approved and what's relevant.
All right, do we have any questions? All right, I would ask the council to entertain a motion to recommend approval of the recommendations for work-based learning placements to receive career-ready status in the accountability system for the 25-26 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I've got a motion, I need a second.
Second.
I've got a second. Thank you. At this time, we will have a roll call vote.
Brian Alexander,
Yes.
Kirk Biggerstaff,
Yes.
Harry Burchett,
Harry Burchett, yes.
Tom Cochran's not on. Will Hodges,
He may have had to have stepped off.
okay. Dennis Messer,
Yes.
Sheila Mitchell, Charlotte Six,
Yes.
Russ Tilford,
Yes.
David Trimble,
Yes.
Henry Webb.
Yes.
Voting is complete.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Next, we welcome Associate Commissioner Matt Ross, Division Director Che Ritter, and Policy Advisor Lindsay Swart from KDE's Office of Finance and Operations to present on the agency amendment to 702 KAR 5130 vehicles designed to carry 9 passengers or less standards for. Hello.
Good morning. So this is a agency amendment. It's a little different than a standard amendment, right? So a little bit of history how we got here. A year ago in May, you all approved our original regulation to this van reg that was based on some legislation that had passed the year in the session prior. So subsequent to that, the KBE approved it in July. It then got filed with ours, open for public comment. There were public comments. KDE, we prepared a statement of consideration, and in that time, became aware that there would be a attempt to clarify some of the existing statute, right? I think there was generally sort of a divergence of opinion between the department and some superintendents about what to and from school really meant, whether that included all transportation of kids or whether that was supposed to just relate to sort of daily routes, right? So in KDE's experience, most of it is school bus drivers, right? So the only to and from in a school bus, those regulations apply to that school bus driver and to that school bus, right? So so there was a couple bills filed, Senate Bill 46 and Senate Bill 95. Senate Bill 95 was ultimately withdrawn. Senate Bill 46 went through several versions, right? Within the Senate, it picked up a committee substitute and a House floor amendment, passed with those, went to the House, picked up a House committee sub and two House floor amendments. One of those ultimately passed. So when it came out of the House, the Senate concurred in House committee sub 1 and House floor amendment 1. So we ultimately got Senate Bill 46, and we had been deferring our regulation, right? It had been in the RS committee. We'd been deferring it. Then we got this legislation. It was signed into law. So we're doing an agency amendment to conform what we did last time to the new legislation, right? So I'll let Lindsay take you through and talk about what sort of those major changes were. It did decouple, in a sense, some of the regulatory requirements from, it does distinguish between to and from school for a daily route purpose and use of vans for approved school activities. And so in that evolution of Senate Bill 46, it started one way, but definitely did not end that same way. Some of the things that were originally taken out were placed back in. So I'll let Lindsay sort of talk about how we're conforming the regulation and how those sort of apply to and from for daily route purposes and for extracurricular activities.
Sure. So as Matt mentioned, Senate Bill 46, it amended 156, 153, and 16380 to distinguish between drivers that transport students to and from school along regular bus routes and then drivers that transport for approved activities. It also updated the capacity from 9 to 10, deleted the alternative transportation plan requirement, and added language requiring the Kentucky Board of Education to establish moving violations that would disqualify a driver. So in our regulation, we have likewise updated the capacity of the vehicle from 9 to 10, added language regarding moving violations that would disqualify an individual, deleted the alternative transportation plan requirement, updated the route safety standards and pickup and drop-off protocols pursuant to Senate Bill 46. That now applies to route drivers. We also deleted the requirement for district-specific training and the requirement that CPR and first aid be done every 2 years. And we also added language about parents transporting their children not being subject to the regulation, because that was language in Senate Bill 46 as well.
So with that, we're happy to take any questions. Try our best to answer.
Matt, I was talking to my transportation director about this. Do they have to stop at all, train?
That is a federal, or that is a state law that is separate to this regulation or to this, even what Senate Bill 46. So yes, they do have to stop at all railroad crossings. I believe the state law says that any vehicle used to transport children has to stop for railroad crossings.
So that's your Suburbans and all.
All of it, yes.
Yeah, I know that in our area, we're 25E, there's a train track right across the highway and people's going 55 miles an hour. That's a concern.
Yeah,
you
and
know?
I think that's one of the reasons that the vehicles are supposed to have stickers that indicate that they stop because, but that is a state law that is not even within the school law codes. I believe that is in the transportation cabinet or the moving violations.
So what you're saying is any vehicle that transports children has to have it, should have that on the back of their car.
That's right.
I don't
It's
see
a-
that a whole lot.
Yeah, it's in our requirement of
Yeah,
our regulation.
it's a requirement of the regulation too. We added that in too.
So I need to add that to my vans.
Yes.
Well, Matt, you know, I called, I just want you to clarify, this has been a topic of interest in our region. The drug testing component.
Yeah.
I reached out to you about that. Could you just clarify for anyone that may be listening, why the drivers, particularly for extra co-curricular activities, has to undergo random drug testing? And the concern being that you're pulling coaches, other people out of class during the instructional day when we can't find substitutes already to go do random drug testing for something they're going to drive at 5 o'clock this evening.
Sure. So the original version of Senate Bill 46 completely decoupled the standards for, or the requirements for a daily route driver and a approved activity driver. Through the evolution, there were requirements put back in on both, right, or on the daily activity driver or the approved activity driver. The including drug testing, including training, including the CPR and first aid, that was put back in. So the regulation and the statute doesn't distinguish between the drug testing for the two, right? So there is no direction within the statute for KDE to promulgate two different standards for drug testing, right? So we have the one, and I think that was one of the concerns last time really was getting clarity on what the General Assembly wanted. So without distinguishing or directing KDE to create a different drug testing scheme, I think the department and our take on it was they ought to be the same, right? Without any other guidance. If you're transporting children, they should be the same drug testing requirements. So I think that's sort of where we came down on that. Like, how do you split the baby there? Like, how do you do something different?
So when the language is written to the extent practicable, there's the position of the Kentucky Department of Education that it's practicable to hold everybody that transports kids to the same drug testing standards.
Yes, that there's confusing around what actually that CFR means, right? If that's more towards how you do the testing, sort of how samples are collected, how they're processed, how that all works. But as far as the statute, it definitely directs at the drug testing, right, and must be done, right? So I think the first version of Senate Bill 46 would have clarified that, but obviously the General Assembly came back and put the drug testing back in, put the training requirements back in, put the there's no physical requirement, right? But put the training and all that back in and requires that prior to doing that driving. So, yeah, I think our position is that I'm not sure how much that CFR clarifies things, but as far as a different drug testing scheme, there's no direction or indication that they should be different at all.
So one last question, and I'm asking these on behalf of my
Sure.
fellow superintendents. So it's not permissible to waive random testing. You can have pre-test, reasonable suspicion, post-accident, but you cannot waive random testing for individuals that drive vans or other vehicles that transport kids, 10 passengers or less, for extra and co-curricular activities.
There's nothing within the statute or within the regulation as it is now to waive them.
Well, my question
Yeah.
is,
Could we?
could you?
I think we could, but I think we didn't create a different standard of drug testing for, there's nothing in the statute telling us to do that, right? Or distinguishing that it should be done. So I think we kept them exactly the same, which is what was approved last time we were here, right?
Yes. Once again, the concern from our region is, there's some of our districts that rely heavily on just vans only, is that I think everybody's on board with pre. I think everybody's on board with reasonable suspicion. I think everybody's on board with pre-accident. I think the question is around pulling staff who most time driving these vans out of instruction, because you can't say, no, let me wait till the period's over when you're called, right? From random selection, and getting this class covered, so forth and so on. I would ask that on behalf of our region that I'm serve and represent, that we make that change for that drives extra and co-curricular activities. To do pre, post-accident, reasonable suspicion for those individuals.
You want to say that?
Yeah, so I mean, we don't specify how often you have to random test drivers. I mean, I know it would be a random pool, but you know, if you only wanted to test like once a year per your district policy, I mean, I think that would be acceptable. I mean, you're not guaranteed that everybody would be pulled. Like if you just random tested one time a year, then maybe one person or two people.
So that would have to conform to the CFR then, as much.
Well, that we say they have to random test, and then so you would implement a random testing policy at your district, how often you decide to randomly test.
So I would ask our resident attorney in the room, if we passed a policy that said we're going to, on behalf of the regulation that doesn't differentiate, and then we differentiate in local policy, what liability are we accepting by doing that? And I know we're always accepting liability, the level.
And that's something, we've talked about this internally as well, by reducing these policies for your van drivers for extracurricular activities. I'm not sure how districts have communicated with their insurers about how that would impact, right, insurance premiums. I know that's a concern among all of our school districts, increased insurance premiums, and whether that would have an impact on that or not. To that point, I think we'd have to look at it to see if this language allows school districts to have a different policy for random drug testing for daily drivers versus extracurricular activity drivers, but I'm happy to look at that and get back with you.
Yeah, and the question is, if the regulation doesn't differentiate, could we do that?
Right, that's, yeah, happy to look at it and see.
And could we also determine when the scope, time period, like before or after, or X months? How detailed could we be when the random selection could occur?
Sure.
Because I think, once again, the concern is just pulling people out of class that may or may not even drive a trip because they don't drive until baseball season, and baseball season don't even start till spring, but I'm gonna random test them the whole first semester, and they don't even drive until spring. That's the kind of examples that's been given to me. And once again, I'm speaking on behalf of the people in our region.
But Henry, I'll chime in on that. In addition to our people that we would be pulling out of instructional settings, we have numerous paraprofessionals who don't work for us as their full-time job that serve as our coaches.
Absolutely.
So we're going to ask them to leave their place of employment to go conform with a random drugs test. And that's a hard ask.
And to your point, the fear is we'll lose those people.
Absolutely.
They'll all quit. And I'm not trying to be difficult, I'm just sharing
we
the real world
we totally
examples.
appreciate that, you know.
And truly, the other thought is the additional cost to school districts. In reference to the staff note, I recognize there's very little cost to KDE. This is an additional expensive burden to our school districts. It adds cost to us with no funding. So please keep that in mind as well. This is a extra lift for our districts on the financial piece.
So when we talk about random, are we talking about a percentage that we have to test each time we do this?
So I think that really ties back to that,
That
to your
is-
board policy, right? And to the, what's permissible within that CFR, the federal regulation, right? Which it's a hard fit to try to overlap stuff that's basically aimed at people with federal CDL licenses, right? And the school bus endorsement, right? And that's the language they use to overlap. And that's why they say as much as practicable, right? But with that language, there's no direction on how it should be differentiated, right? So reading it as it is, we take it, there's no real, I don't read much wiggle room there. What do you think?
So I'll go back to my original question, and of course, I know you're in the room, I'm putting you on the spot, because I know attorneys like to think. Could the regulations say legally for individuals that drive extracurricular and co-curricular trips outside of the normal school day, or during the school day, if it's extra co-curricular, that's not to and from school, that's differentiated in the law, that pre-drug testing, when they start, reasonable suspicion, and post-accident would apply, but nothing else?
I mean, we're happy to look at that. Again, though, you are required to carry the same insurance on
Yeah.
both people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. I think one of the issues that we ran into throughout, the legislation going through is it started, and the message was no drug testing at all for the folks who are doing extracurricular driving. And that's policy determination that the General Assembly is free to make. But ultimately, there was testimony, and they ultimately said, no, we're not going to say that individuals driving students for extracurricular activities are off the hook for drug testing, that those students have some lesser standard of safety for being transported in that situation. So we're also trying to balance what the legislature's intent here was, because we went into it thinking they're going to get rid of drug testing altogether for extracurricular drivers, and ultimately that's not how they came out of this.
Yeah, completely understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's a tough situation.
So again, I think this is an agency amendment. We don't require any approval. We just wanted feedback and to let you know where we were in the process. So we'll take that under advisement, and we'll let you all know of however it comes out. And then it will go back to the KBE. We'll also have a discussion with them before it's ultimately filed with LRC.
So we do not need to pass anything?
No, I don't think there's no need for approval, right?
Sorry, it's very difficult for me to get this mic turned off and on. There is no requirement that LSAC, review or approve this, but I think Matt and his staff wanted to bring it to you all for feedback because there's been a lot of discussions, right? We've gone in many numerous directions here, and as Matt indicated, it's been deferred for quite a while because we knew that changes were coming from the General Assembly. So I wanted to get any feedback that you all had. And Dr. Webb, I'll look into and get your questions answered.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
We now have proposed amendments to 2 regulations for our review and action. We welcome KDE Deputy Commissioner and General Counsel Todd Allen and KDE Staff Attorney to present the proposed amendment to 701 KAR 5090 Teacher Disciplinary Hearings.
Good morning.
Hello.
We have before you a regulation amendment for teacher disciplinary hearings, which this is teacher tribunal hearings, the process that KDE administers here. This regulation was up for its 7-year expiration, and in reviewing it, we determined that it needed some cleanup. And I have Sarah Bentley here from my office who has done the work on the regulation, and she'll walk you through a summary of the changes that we made.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Sarah Bentley. I'm one of the staff attorneys here. I don't know how to do it. And basically the changes in here, nothing is substantively changed. It just needed to sound better. After a look at it again and realizing it was coming up before expiration, it made sense just to do all of that work. So it looks like a lot, but it really isn't a big, there's not anything really changing at all about the process. It's just trying to make it more concise and easier to understand once it's actually printed out for you. It makes more sense. When you look at it like this, it looks busy, but it's really not. But we're happy to entertain any questions you might have.
All right. I would ask the council to entertain a motion to recommend approval of the amendment to 701 KAR 5090, teacher disciplinary hearings. Is there a motion?
Brian Alexander, motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. At this time, we will have a roll call vote.
Pardon, who was the second on the motion? Okay, thank you.
Yes, Master.
Brian Alexander,
Yes.
Kirk Biggerstaff,
Yes.
Harry Burgett,
Harry Burchett, yes.
Will Hodges, Dennis Messer,
Yes.
Charla Six,
Yes.
Russ Tilford,
Yes.
David Trumbull,
Yes.
Henry Webb.
Yes.
The motion carries.
All right, thank you. Thank you all. For our final item on today's agenda, we now ask Katie, Deputy Commissioner, General Counsel Allen, to present the proposed amendment to 701 KAR 5170 waiver.
Thank you very much. Last year, we were before you promulgating this regulation for the first time. The General Assembly took action during its 2025 session to put in place a new waiver process where school boards could come to the Kentucky Board of Education and ask for a waiver from statutes or administrative regulations. Just by way of history, there was previously a process where school boards could come ask for a waiver of a regulation only. To get a waiver of statute, they had to become a district of innovation. That whole district of innovation process, the old process went away. The old waiver process for regulations went away, and we had this new combined process for any school board to come ask for a waiver of statute or administrative regulation. After a year of operating the program, we had a few recommended changes to the General Assembly. They had a few changes of their own that they made, and that was all done in Senate Bill 263. So we're now back before you again recommending some changes to comply with Senate Bill 263 from this 2026 legislative session. So I'll just go through them quickly and then answer any questions that you may have. On page 2 of the regulation, which we're bringing up on the screen there, you'll first see that we're adding a facility project application, so a specific application and form for facilities waivers. Previously, all waivers expired in 3 years, and we communicated to the General Assembly that that doesn't really work for facilities waivers. Those need to live, for the useful life of the facility itself. So they have carved out, a different timeline for facilities waivers, and we're going to put that in a separate form specifically related to facilities. If we scroll down, we are removing there at line 14 the special education maximum class size waiver. That will now be handled by KDE internally through an exemption process. So school districts don't have to use this waiver process in order to do that. So striking that from the regulation. If we move on over to page 4, at the top there, we changed the timeline to 30 days. Previously, the statute said that the Kentucky Board of Education had to take up a waiver request at its next regular meeting. We communicated to the General Assembly that we really needed more time. So, for example, if the board met on June 4th and we got an application on June 2nd, we had to turn it around in 2 days to give it to the state board. They did change the statute to the meeting within 30 days. Practically, I don't think that makes much difference given the fact that we meet once a month, right? It's still going to be that the meeting 30 days from the time we get an application is nearly always going to be the very next meeting of the state board. But nevertheless, we're making the change to comply there with the statute. Down on line 8, you will notice that we add in here a process for consultation with the Education Professional Standards Board. Senate Bill 263 indicated that school boards could now bring to the KBE a request for waiver of EPSB regulations that apply to state or to local school boards. Now, EPSB already has a process that it utilizes for waiving their own administrative regulations. The statute calls for us to have a consultation with EPSB, so we're building that process in here. If we get a request to waive an EPSB regulation to the KBE, we will send it to the EPSB and ask for their feedback on whether they recommend it to be waived or not, and then wait for them to get back to us. And that continues on down at the bottom of page 4 as well, adding that EPSB consultation process. Over on page 5, around lines 7, 8, and 9, we previously indicated that the department needed 45 days to review these waivers. We have trimmed that down to 20, given the 30-day turnaround for those regulations. If we receive a waiver request that does not allow the department 20 days to review it, then we will notify the Kentucky Board of Education that we did not have sufficient time to conduct a meaningful review of the waiver request. There were some changes in Senate Bill 263 that indicated KDE could not make recommendations to the state board as to whether or not to approve or deny a waiver request. So you'll notice throughout this regulation, we strike previously where we would indicate if we didn't have sufficient time to review, we would recommend denial. Now we just say we'll just notify the state board that we did not have sufficient time to review. We won't necessarily recommend that they deny. And that continues down through the end of that page. Over on page 6, lines 13 through 24, that just indicates how we're going to perform our technical review here at the department. There are certain reasons that we would stop doing any further review of a waiver request. The first is if we don't have sufficient time to conduct a meaningful review, we'll notify the state board of that and then discontinue any further review of the waiver request. And then there, paragraph B on line 19, if the waiver does not meet certain statutory requirements, then we will notify the state board it doesn't meet those statutory requirements and stop our further review. Over on page 8 at line 15, we update the standard for School of Innovation. That changed in Senate Bill 263. Previously, a School of Innovation was one that wanted to waive statutes or administrative regulations that prevented it from entering into a contract with an education service provider to provide service within the school. That was removed, and now you see that the standard is the likelihood of improving student outcomes in a manner that would be difficult or impossible without a waiver. Schools can request to be designated as a School of Innovation. So we've updated our regulation to comply there. And then finally, if we go down to page 10, we've added a section for requests for technical assistance. Senate Bill 263 indicated a school district could come to KDE. Right, school districts sometimes don't know the specific statutes or administrative regulations that they need waived in order to engage in a process, so they can explain that process to us and we will respond back to them and tell them the regulations and statutes that they need to waive, if any, in order to engage in that process. Sometimes we've already done some of this informally. We often find that school districts actually don't need any waiver in order to engage in some of the processes that they wish to. But nevertheless, we've put this process in place here, and then if you scroll down, you'll see that we have updated all of our forms. Those are provided to you in your portal as well. That new facility project request forms being incorporated by reference, as well as a form for districts to request technical assistance. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Do we have any questions? All right, I would ask the council to entertain a motion to recommend approval of the amendment to 701 KAR 5170 waiver request. Is there a motion?
Harry Burchett, I make a motion, we approve the waiver request process.
Thank you, Harry. Do I have a second?
David Trimble, I'll second.
All right. At this time, we will have a roll call vote.
Brian Alexander,
Yes.
Kirk Biggerstaff,
Yes.
Harry Burchett,
Harry Burchett, yes.
Will Hodges,
Yes.
Will Hodges, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay, Dennis Messer.
Can't hear.
Dennis Messer, yes. Is that what you said? Okay. Charlotte Six,
Yes.
Russ Tilford,
Yes.
David Trimble,
Yes.
and Henry Webb.
Yes.
The motion carries.
All right. Thank you for your engagement today. Our next meeting is scheduled for July 28th, and I will now adjourn the meeting. Thank you.